A story of horror, survival, and radical forgiveness during the Rwanda genocide. The quiet before the storm. In the years leading up to 1994, Alice Mukarurinda lived a life much like anyone else in Rwanda. She was a young Tutsi woman living in a small village, surrounded by neighbors she had known since childhood. The people in her community shared meals, celebrated weddings, and mourned losses together. Yet beneath this surface of unity, a dangerous undercurrent of division was slowly rising. For decades, political tensions between the Hutu majority and Tutsi minority had been manipulated by colonial powers, and later by Rwandan political leaders. The seeds of hatred had been planted long before Alice was born, and by the early 1990s they had taken root. Hutu extremists, using propaganda spread through radio and newspapers, demonized Tutsis, calling them cockroaches that needed to be exterminated. Alice heard the whispers of fear and hatred creeping into daily life. Friends began to speak in hushed tones. Neighbors who once greeted each other warmly now eyed one another with suspicion. But still, she could not have imagined the horror that was to come. On April 6, 1994, the assassination of Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana ignited the genocide. Within hours, roadblocks were set up across the country, and death squads began hunting down Tutsis. Armed militias, known as the Interahamwe, meaning those who work together, patrolled the streets with machetes, clubs, and guns. Alice, along with her family and many others, tried to flee. Some sought refuge in churches, believing that no one would dare commit such violence in a sacred place. But they were wrong. The killers stormed churches and slaughtered people inside. When the militia arrived in her village, Alice saw neighbors turn against one another. People she had known for years, some of whom she had grown up with, picked up machetes and joined the killing. She ran, desperately searching for safety, but there was none. It was on one of these desperate days that Alice encountered Jean Bosco Nzabamwita. He was not a stranger, he was from her village. Before the genocide, he had been just another young man, someone she had seen in the marketplace or on the roads. Now, he was among the killers. Alice had nowhere left to run. When Jean Bosco and other militia members surrounded her, she pleaded for her life. But in that moment, she was not seen as a person. She was seen as an enemy. Jean Bosco raised his machete. With one brutal swing, he severed Alice's hand. The pain was instant, searing. Blood poured from the wound as she collapsed to the ground, screaming. But the horror did not end there. As she lay in agony, she witnessed the unthinkable, the murder of her baby. The world blurred as she drifted in and out of consciousness. She was left for dead, a bleeding body in a country filled with corpses. Alice should have died that day, but somehow she found the strength to keep breathing. With her remaining hand, she clutched her wound and pressed against the dirt, forcing herself to move. She crawled for hours, her vision dimming. When she finally found shelter, she was taken in by people who risked their lives to help her. They hid her, tended to her wound as best they could, and kept her alive while the genocide raged on outside. For 3 months, Rwanda was a living hell. The world watched but did little. By the time the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, led by Paul Kagame, took control and ended the genocide in July 1994, nearly 1 million people had been murdered. Bodies filled rivers and fields. Cities smelled of death. The country was broken. After the genocide, Rwanda faced an impossible challenge: how to move forward when nearly every survivor had lost someone, and nearly every perpetrator was someone's neighbor. Alice struggled with her loss. The pain of her missing hand was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. She had lost her baby, her family, and her trust in humanity. How could she live in the same land where her attackers still walked free? The government of Rwanda, recognizing that imprisoning every killer was impossible, introduced Gacaca courts, a community-based justice system where perpetrators could confess their crimes, seek forgiveness, and attempt to reintegrate into society. Survivors, like Alice, were faced with an unimaginable choice: justice or reconciliation. Years passed before Alice saw Jean Bosco Nzabamwita again. He had been arrested and imprisoned, but under Rwanda's reconciliation programs, he was eventually released. When he sought her out to ask for forgiveness, Alice felt a storm of emotions. Could she ever forgive the man who had severed her hand? The man who had killed her child? Jean Bosco confessed, tears streaming down his face. He admitted to everything: how he had been consumed by hatred, how he had blindly followed the orders of those who incited violence. He said he had lived with guilt every day, haunted by what he had done. Alice could have turned away. She could have spat at him, screamed, demanded that he suffer. Instead, she listened. And in that moment, something in her shifted. Forgiveness was not easy. It did not erase her pain or bring back her baby, but holding on to hatred had been its own kind of prison. Letting go of that burden, she realized, was the only way she could truly live again. Alice did the unthinkable. She forgave Jean Bosco. More than that, she chose to work with him. Together, they became part of Rwanda's reconciliation efforts, speaking to communities about the dangers of hatred and the power of forgiveness. Their story became a symbol of Rwanda's rebirth. In a country where nearly everyone had lost someone, people had to choose between vengeance and healing. Alice and Jean Bosco chose healing. Today, Alice continues to share her story, not to erase the past, but to ensure it is never repeated. She has found peace not in forgetting, but in remembering and in choosing love over hate. Alice's journey is not just a story about Rwanda. It is a story about humanity. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is hope. That forgiveness does not excuse the past, but it can transform the future. As she stands before crowds, telling her story with the man who once tried to kill her, Alice embodies the incredible strength of the human spirit. She teaches the world that no matter how deep the wounds, healing is possible. And in a world still plagued by division and hatred, her message is more powerful than ever. We must learn to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because we deserve peace. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe. Click on the notification bell so you can be alerted anytime a new video is uploaded. And please don't forget, share and be a blessing to someone. God richly bless you. Shalom.